Welcome everyone to 5 Writers, 5 Minutes, where five very talented, creative kids book authors are going to share their advice and tips on writing wonderful books for kids. My name is Deborah Abela.
I'm Tristan Bancks.
I'm Sarah Armstrong.
I'm Lian Tanner.
And I'm Zanni Louise.
And we're going to explode ideas today. This is a really great topic. I love this one so much. We're in a critique group, so every month we meet and we literally explode our ideas. We'll bring an idea to the group and we'll say, okay, it's not working, or what should I do? And generally the advice is to kind of blow it up. So we're going to talk about the importance of maybe not just settling on that first idea, but maybe even settling on your fifth or sixth idea. So Tristan, can we start with you? You've exploded a few things in your day.
Oh, so many explosions. It's very sad, because you want that first idea to work and everybody tells you you're a genius, and then you write the thing really quickly and it comes out and you sell millions of copies and, sail to the Bahamas. But what actually happens is, with Scartown, my most recent book, it was a short story that I wrote for a collection, and the short story wouldn't get out of my mind about this sort of sunken town and this secret between these kids. Their friend goes missing on the edge of this sort of lake that sunk the old town beneath a lake, and they go out along the lake edge looking for their friend. And as they interact with each other, it starts to come out in backstory how the friend actually disappeared and that they are actually sort of responsible for it, or one of them is, and the kind of recriminations around that. So I thought, this is going to be great. I'll write a novel. I know all the characters. I know the setting. It's going to only take me like 2 weeks and it's going to be a work of genius. But of course, everyone who's ever tried to turn something short into something long realizes that it's really hard. And it actually took me years and years and years to put the old story aside, take the bit of the setting and the characters, but to totally rethink the plot and not just have these kids going out on the edge of the lake, because I could only ever get a 15,000 word story out of it and not a sort of 50,000 word novel that I needed. So it took me a long time to learn this rule around exploding your ideas.
I think I haven't ever exploded anything quite that dramatically, but I go into writing a first draft expecting it to change, which is kind of good, because then when you have to do the explosion, it's not so painful. And with Big Magic, I would say the major changes I made were the first half roughly was way too long before we got to the sort of action and this turning point, basically, spoiler alert, where she goes to the parallel universe, the main character. It just went on too long and the pace was too slow. And then once we got to the parallel universe, we didn't spend long enough there in all the kind of exciting stuff that was happening there. So I had to do this absolute concertinaing of the first part and a lengthening of the second part. And that was painful, less explosion and more kind of slashing, I think. And I lost some great scenes. It was a great scene and a house on the Gold Coast, and it just all went, and I really loved it, but it had to go because it was slowing things down. So that's an example of just really accepting that early draft and second draft even, and even perhaps third draft will need some big changes. And I think once I realized that and accepted that, it just made life so much easier, because then I was open to those changes and I didn't get too sort of wedded to the way it had turned out. So I'm always trying to ask myself, how can I make it even more enjoyable for the reader? Because at the end, it's the reader that you're writing it for. And the first draft kind of feels like you're writing it for yourself, but it's all about the reader. So when we explode stories, we're doing it for the reader to give them a better, more exciting, more dramatic, more fun experience.
Yeah, I agree, Sarah. I think that first draft, it's always really, or the first idea even, it's always really tempting for me to dive in straight away, like get this idea, start writing, and yeah, like Tristan says, we hope it's going to be amazing. But I find that I need to give a story, I need to give an idea a lot of incubation time, and that if I don't, then the story doesn't grow properly. It comes out very, very shallow. So when I get an idea, I spend a lot of time writing around the idea, not writing the actual story, but writing bits and pieces here, filling notebooks up with maybe this and maybe that, and throwing ideas onto the page to see what sticks. When I started working on Spellhound, I thought that the main character, Flax, was going to be a mouse, because the main character was going to be spinning webs to catch magic. And I really liked the idea of these little mice kind of in the forest spinning webs. I thought that was really cute. But it just didn't quite feel, I suppose it didn't feel quite rich enough. It was the first thought. And if there's a small part of you that's saying that an idea isn't quite right, it's really important to listen to that part of you that's saying. So I kept playing, I kept making notes, I kept thinking about, well, this is happening in the floating forest. What sort of creatures would live in the floating forest? And I came up with horned globs and sketters and morkits. And then I came up with minchwiggins. And that's when flax became a minchwiggen instead of a mouse. So for me, that first idea is kind of often a shadow of the final idea. It's just a skeleton. And I need to keep pushing it if I want that final idea to be so much richer and more interesting.
I really love that. And it speaks quite well to the metaphor I always keep in my head. And I might have mentioned it before on this podcast, is of my rich garden soil that I have to keep cultivating by doing that free writing, all of that sort of stuff. And all those story ideas you plant in it, they grow and become a wild and woolly tree. But all the debris that you cut off from that tree goes back into that story soil and cultivates all the future stories. So I never feel loss. I never feel grief. Last week, I cut 20,000 words just like that I'd been really laboring over, and they were gone. And I felt fine about it. And that's kind of how I roll. And it's how I've always rolled. The most explicit example probably of actually exploding the whole story idea, though, was way back when I wrote Tiggy and the Magic Paintbrush, which was my first junior fiction series. And that started off as Win and the 3D printing machine. And it came from an idea where my daughter was jumping on the bed. Oh, what if we had a 3D printing machine that could print magic stuff? And that's kind of how it began. So I think I wrote 30 different iterations of those stories, and eventually got to the fact that, oh, hang on, she needs something portable. A 3D printing machine is not something you can pop in your pocket, take it to school. So she needed something that could go in her sock. And then again, my daughter was running past. She's like, I've got a magic paintbrush. I was like, oh, perfect. So that's sort of how it evolved. Her name evolved. All these things evolved. But I'm quite happy to do that every single time, like you said, Lian, to get to the better story.
Yeah.
And that's the point. That's why we're doing this, isn't it? And I love the idea that, you're all saying there comes a point where you need to accept that idea is not as good. And you've got a niggle telling you that, but you love it. But actually, when you let it go, the second you let it go, not only does it let other ideas in, it's good because you feel like the story is much better. I know with the Kindness Project, which is my latest novel, that book started with a little idea of a kid who adores her grandma, who lives in an aged care facility, doesn't treat her very nicely, and the kid kidnaps grandma. And I thought, you know what, this is going to be a light-hearted, really fun romp with a day of just kidnapping grandmas, and it's going to be so much fun. But I really quickly realized, kind of like what Tristan was saying, it's not enough for a novel. And in fact, that's just going to be one moment in the novel, but then it explodes into all these other ideas. So I had to kind of let go that the novel wasn't about that. That was one teeny tiny part. And I love that. And with the Book of Wondrous Possibilities, that was the same idea as well. I tore that apart so many times thinking, I know that there's a nub of a good idea here, but I'm cluttering it up with all this stuff. And Zanni, your idea of cutting all of that stuff away is beautiful because it just, it refertilizes the soil and makes it richer. So I guess
20,000 words is too many to cut out, Zanni. Don't ever cut out
20 is horrifying. I've done it once. I've cut out 20,000 words once, and
I do it weekly. Yeah.
Oh, you're so good though. But I guess the big thing we're all trying to say is be open to throwing away ideas that are good, but actually there's something better. Be open to the story changing as you go, and you learn about it more. Even in today's critique group, we're learning about new stories that we're all writing, which means inevitably some stuff is going to get thrown away, and that's how you find the gold. So on that note, go out with your gold digging, and I hope your stories are amazing. Blow them up, and you will find good things. We are a podcast and a YouTube thingy, and we are loving your letters and your emails that you are sending us. Thank you so much for all your encouragement. You know, you're just encouraging us to talk more. So we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.